Speaking of linebackers, Steph, this is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
This is going to be a really good one. So, I sent out a tweet messing around before I headed to the beach on Saturday. And it's one of those, Dad, how good were this player? How good? And I put, Dad, how good was Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman? And man, it's a banger. Like, it's a banger. NFL players, former NFL players were just like, can you believe, dog? Like, it over 700,000 impressions, if I'm not mistaken. And, of course, it sparks a debate. Because the 49ers, we have been blessed to watch Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, now Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, even in the middle for a little while, Chris Borland. 49ers know how to get their linebackers for whatever reason with different regimes. But, Steph, the debate about Patrick Willis and Fred Warner. I want you to start because I've got inflammatory remarks and thoughts about this.
Wow. Okay. I'm curious what you think. You want me to give like my who do I think is?
Yeah, sure. Just
okay.
Kick it off, and I think we'll get there. We'll get there.
I mean, for me personally, like I do still feel like Patrick Willis is the best linebacker the 49ers have ever had, and you can make an argument he's one of the best in the game that has ever played. So I think Fred Warner is not there yet. I think when people bring up this discussion, it comes from a place of somewhat like recency bias, and I think we forget how good Patrick Willis was. He was so incredibly dominant. I mean, you're seeing this clip here. I mean, dude was a freight train. Not to say that Fred Warner like hasn't had some incredible hits, some incredible tackles, but for one, I'll say this, like context matters as it does in most arguments and discussions. The context here is that they played in two completely different eras of football. And they were asked to do two completely different things for their respective defenses, right? So I think Fred Warner playing in today's, NFL and having been a former safety, I think he has more experience doing the coverage stuff as well as, being in the box when he needs to. But I feel like Patrick Willis was like almost exclusively like in the box. And that's why when you compare their numbers, you see Patrick Willis with the number of tackles he had and, things like that. And actually why Fred Warner has the same amount as Patrick Willis had in interceptions in his entire career, like 8 interceptions. Like Fred Warner already has 8, right? So I think that speaks to that as well. So two completely like different players, both that I can appreciate what they were able to do for their defenses. Here's the kicker though. Here for me is where like you can't really argue too much against Patrick Willis being better than Fred Warner. It's the all pros.
Oh yeah.
It's the all pros. Like it's not even close. 6 all pros, and if I'm not mistaken, didn't he do that consecutively?
And in
seven because he was a second team.
He was second team in 7 seasons, 6 all
in 7 seasons. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He made Pro Bowls in every single season.
Yes, because he was technically he had 7 all pros. 6 were first team, and then 1 was I think a second team. So I mean that's hard to argue with, and you got to remember too, like Patrick Willis was playing in an era in which Ray why am I spacing on his name? Ray Lewis. Yeah, Ray Lewis, Urlacher, this is pretty hard to argue that Willis was just like he's in a different tier than Fred Warner. Now, I will say like Fred Warner has the potential, he has the trajectory to maybe get up to that conversation. I just don't think he's there right now.
Okay. So, Patrick Willis and Fred Warner function differently as linebackers. Function differently, 100%.
Yeah.
2 different things. Same position, different players. That's why they both have 8 interceptions in 14 less games, right? Mm-hmm. So Patrick was around the ball. And don't get it twisted. Patrick will go out and cover. Like, it's not exclusively something. It's just Fred is a converted safety 2 linebacker. 20 and a half sacks, though. Literally around the ball the entire time. And I hate to say this because I'm glad you brought it up because this was going to be one of my points. In an era in which Ray Lewis played, we all fought and said that Patrick Willis is better than Ray Lewis. I can stand here today and say that if Fred Warner was in that era with those guys, he would be third on that list. He's behind Ray Lewis and he's behind Patrick Willis, right? No disrespect to Levante David and the guys that he's going up against now, but they ain't Ray. And Patrick Willis was in here when the 49ers defense was not good early on in his career, literally wrecking games. It is a lot of recency bias. It is what we're going to see. The argument comes down to this: peak and longevity. Cover your ears, 49ers fans, because you're not going to like this. Frank Gore has more rushing yards than a lot of running backs. Frank Gore is not better than a lot of running backs, even though he has more yards. Longevity and peak. Can you look me in the eye and tell me that Frank Gore was better than Barry Sanders, even though he has more yards than him? No. Doesn't take away from the fact that Frank Gore is a Hall of Famer. Doesn't take away from the fact that he is going to be one of the greatest that's ever played. But right now, Fred Warner is going to play 14 games this season and pass Patrick Willis. Patrick Willis only plays 7 seasons. I have a hard time with he is going to pass him in this, this, and this. But, Luke Kuechly against Fred Warner? Ooh, wow. Let me get this point off real quick, and then we'll get back to that one. That one's really good. Yeah. But 7 years only, but his peak is 6 All-Pros, 7 Pro Bowls, right? And a guy who is an absolute machine, 20.5 sacks, everything, tackling machine, tackled everybody. Absolute dog. And it's going to be, Warner's going to pass him this year in tackles. He'll most likely get an interception. Same thing. But Pro Football Reference has something that they call average value added. And it's their own formula in terms of how much you're adding to your team. In 112 games, the average value added by Fred Warner, 108. In 98 games, Fred Warner, 77. Now, again, that's their own formula. But this is the absolute crux of the argument. Peak against longevity. I am not going to knock Fred Warner for playing long because his game is hard to play long. That's why so many guys retire so early. But this 7-year stretch in which it's going to be the same thing, you've got Fred Warner with 9 sacks, 20.5. They're going to pass each other in solo tackles. That's fine. 16 forced fumbles in the same amount of time, essentially. And then 6 All-Pros. It's hard for me to automatically just say, oh, Fred's better. Fred's going to play longer. But I don't know in this 7-year stretch that he was better than Patrick Willis, and I have a hard time with that. I would